For the past 5 months, I debated on whether or not I should publicly share this story. And I was torn because half of me was concerned about jeopardizing my job, while the other half wanted to call out an unfortunate experience. And I hope that by sharing this story, it can inspire people to voice their experiences of racism and discrimination with the ultimate goal of eradicating this behavior from our society. At the beginning of the year, I appeared as a globetrotter on Good Day, Alabama, which is a Fox affiliate in Birmingham. And towards the end of the segment, while showing a few tricks, 2 anchors, Mickey Ferguson and Claire Huddleston, started throwing fruit at me in lieu of a basketball. In the span of 36 seconds, 2 tangerines and ultimately a banana were thrown at me on live television. Throwing fruit at me diminishes the Naismith Hall of Fame legacy of the Harlem Globetrotters to that of a circus. But throwing a banana at a black man and passing it off as entertainment displays an unacceptable lack of awareness. And quite frankly, I'm having a very difficult time understanding how someone could work in the media field and not know that this is offensive. Let's remember that in the year 1963, Birmingham was the city where 4 young black girls died in a church bombing by the KKK. And in that same year, Martin Luther King Jr. was jailed for leading a peaceful march of black protesters. Whether the disrespect was intentional or not, it doesn't lessen the damage that was caused. This carries deep racial undertones that date back to the early 1900s when black people were held on display in human zoos. And this is a prime example of how the effects of 400 years of oppression have impacted this country. This is symbolic of the daily microaggressions that black people deal with, and I'm not going to be silent about it anymore. Back in February, Fox 6 proposed that I should call them to receive an apology. And rather than appearing combative and ruffling the feathers with my job, I stood down, knowing that I wasn't satisfied. And with all the shame and disappointment in myself for not saying anything sooner, I have to own that. But with the senseless murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, it is impossible for black people not to have their own racial PTSD emotionally triggered. And the more that you think about these experiences, the more you think about why they happened in the first place and if they were truly resolved. The constant battle of compromising your integrity, weighing the pros and cons of whether you should call out a racist act, is extremely taxing. After several weeks of going back and forth, I was finally able to have an interview with Fox, which made me feel like we were in a good place. But then when the interview aired, Fox omitted all of the historical information that I explained as to why this act is so offensive. And this is another example of how history has been carefully presented to favor and save face of the oppressor. The most relevant part omitted is the story of Ota Benga, who was an African man who was kidnapped and put on display at the Bronx Zoo. He was caged in the monkey house and then tortured, spit on, and had bananas thrown at him while over 250,000 people came to visit him at that time. If you take nothing else from this video, please understand the value in speaking when necessary to right a wrong. Meaningful dialogue with other cultures comes with the discomfort in confronting these realities, but it gives us the ability to understand what other people experience and allows us to become aware of the racial blind spots that we all have. And yes, I understand that speaking out potentially makes me a target, but staying silent undermines the fight for racial justice and chooses the side of the oppressor. With all the work that we have left, it is important to keep love, kindness, empathy, and courage in the forefronts of our minds.